time. Today's story is called Lady the Hominid Goes to Outer Space. Alright, well, first off, what is a hominid? A hominid is a Bigfoot, right? It's a chimpanzee, it's like a human, it's a big monkey man thing. Well, this is a whole race of beings, you know, it's a species. And Lady was one of these species of Bigfoots. And Lady, she lived with all the other hominids in peace and harmony. There was like 100 or 1,000 or 100,000 or maybe 1,000,000. There was a lot of hominids, right? And they all lived in the meadow, in the forest, in peace and harmony. And one day out of the sky comes this black twirly thing coming right at her. And Lady thinks, that's gotta be a bird, right? What else could it be? It's coming out of the sky. Well, it comes down on top of her and it's silver and it's shining and it's circular and it's going wah, 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 wah. And she says, this is highly unusual. And then there's a bright blue light all around her and there's smoke and steam and mist and she's rising up into the air and she's going up into the sky and she could see all of her hominid friends down there and they're saying, what is happening? And she says, I don't know. And then she goes up into the flying saucer and the flying saucer shoots off into outer space and she's gone, right? So now she's out in outer space, but she doesn't know it. She thinks she's in another forest. She looks around, she's in a very strange forest and she touches things and it's all holographic. Her hands go right through the trees and the bushes and the shrubs. And she doesn't know what a holograph is. She just thinks this is not normal, right? And then from out of the holographic forest emerges these tiny little beings. They're kind of shaped similar. They've got 2 legs, 2 arms, but they got these big heads and then this green skin that's kind of glowing, and they got these big blue eyes and no mouths. 2 little nose holes, 2 little ear holes, and long fingers. And they say to her, they talk with no mouth, they just talk directly into her brain in hominid talk. They say, here, eat this. And they gave her some dehydrated ice cream. And so Lady says, okay, and she eats the dehydrated ice cream. And then they're like, good, thank you. And then they put her back down onto the earth and then they fly away and she watches them go. And she says, what just happened? Well, a few days later, she starts getting bigger and bigger in her belly. It's her belly. She's becoming bigger and bigger, and it looks like she's about to have a baby. And all the hominid guys, they're looking at each other like, did you put a baby inside a lady? And they're like, no. But pretty soon, she's going to have her baby. And all the lady hominids gather around Lady. And all the gentlemen are kind of looking over their shoulders trying to see what's going on. And a baby splats out a lady. And all the other lady hominids, they go screaming into the forest. Ah! And then Lady's like, what's the matter? And she looks down at her little baby and she screams and she goes, ah! It doesn't look like any hominid she'd ever seen. It's very strange looking, but she says, no, this is my baby. I'm going to love it no matter what. And it was fleshy and pink and it had no hair on it, which is very strange for a hominid, you know. And it turns out it was not a hominid, it was something else. And she realized, oh, when they gave her the ice cream, they must have put a baby inside of her. Because the little thing that she had created, which as it turned out was a human, it resembled these little green men from up on the spaceship a little bit. I mean, it was like mostly hominid, but it was also similar to the little green men from the spaceship. And she said, well, I'm going to love it no matter what. And she raised it and, she nursed it up to be big and strong, but it was always cold and it couldn't walk. It couldn't really do anything very good. It was a very helpless creature. But she said whatever, she just kept it warm and she gave it her milk to make it big and strong. And then what happened was this flying saucer came back and it picked up one of her friends. It took her in the sky and then brought her back, and she was had a big belly with the baby, and she gave birth to another human. And they were all like, oh geez, there's another one. And well, they said, you know, you gotta love it anyways, even if it is very weird. So lady raised her human baby, and her hominid friend raised her human baby, and then the flying saucer came back and it took up another lady hominid, and then another one, and then another one. It kept taking all the lady hominids up into outer space and giving them ice cream, and then when they came back, they were big with babies, and they were having all these human babies, and pretty soon there were dozens and dozens of human babies running around while they were kind of crawling around, and they raised them, you know, they gave them their milk, and they made them, you know, stronger so that they could, like, you know, walk and talk a little bit. And then one day, in the middle of the day, out of the blue, the flying saucer came back and it went, and it came down with the blue light, and it picked up all the humans, and it took all the human toddlers out into outer space. And now all the hominids were very sad because these human toddlers, that was their babies, and they were so sad. And then they were waiting for their human toddler babies to come back, and they never did. And then all the lady hominids were sad, but the gentleman hominids were like, hey, this is our chance. Let's go comfort these ladies. And so, you know, life went on, and the hominids, they started making hominid babies again, and they didn't know if they were ever going to see their human babies, and they got really sad about it. But one day, out of the blue, many, many years later, the flying saucer came back, and there was a big blue light going brrr, and then all the humans were there again, and there was, you know, dozens of human babies, maybe hundreds of human babies, and Adam was there, and he went up to his mama, and he said, oh, you made a brother and a sister, and you had hominid brothers and sisters, and that was great. And they had a big happy family reunion. And then the humans, they started behaving kind of weird. They were talking weird. They didn't talk hominid talk anymore. They learned like reading and writing and arithmetic up on the spaceship. And they started making implements, like tools out of wood, and scraping at the ground and collecting these like shiny golden rocks that were metal, that were gold. And the hominids were like, why are you doing that? And they're like, this is very important human business. You wouldn't understand. We're creating a mine, and then we're mining the mine. It's a gold mine. We need this gold. It's very important. And the hominids said, whatever, I guess. And so all the humans pulled all the gold out of the earth. There was a lot of gold at this time, you know, because back in these before times, there was lots of gold. And they would fill it up, they would make big piles of gold, and then the flying saucer once in a while would come down, boom, 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 and go, and take the gold up into outer space and disappear. And then eventually there was no more gold, because they'd collected most of it. What was left was just paltry quantities. And then the humans, they didn't know what to do with themselves if they weren't mining for gold. And then one day the flying saucer came back, and it took Adam up into outer space. And lady was like, oh, not again, my baby. But Adam was kind of a young man by this point. And then Adam came back from outer space, and he had a pamphlet. And he went and he sat down with lady, and he showed her his pamphlet, and she said, what that? And Adam said, well, the pamphlet's called How to Liquidate the Human Race, subtitled An Exploration of Opposites and Hypocrisy. So as it turned out, the aliens, they didn't have any purpose for the humans anymore now that all the gold had been mined. And so they were kind of like, well, you humans got to take care of yourselves. And by take care of yourselves, I mean disappear forever, so we don't have problems with you later on down the road. And so they were reading the pamphlet, and it basically said, well, this is what you got to do with the humans. You got to give them the opposite of whatever they want and then tell them the opposite of whatever is happening. If the humans want health, you give them sickness. If they want the truth, you give them lies. If they want money, you give them no money. If they want no money, you give them money. If they want peace, you give them war. If they want friends, you give them enemies. And, you know, just basically make their lives very difficult. And why are we going to do this? Sounds like a terrible thing to do. Well, no, actually, it's pretty great if you are the leader of them. You tell them you have blue blood and they'll think you're special and they'll pay homage to you and everything's going to be great for you. And I'm just like, well, that sounds pretty good, actually. And so Adam went out and he began to implement the dictates of the pamphlet. He made everybody's life really miserable except for his own. He had a really great life. He made all the people go build pyramids and bridges and skyscrapers, so they didn't know what was going on. They were too busy. And then they had no food because they wanted food, so he gave them no food because that's what's in the pamphlet. And a lady, she went up to Adam and she said, "You treat your people bad. Why?" And he said, "Ma, you wouldn't understand. This is human business. I'm just doing human stuff here. I gotta do what I gotta do." And lady, she was sad because, you know, Adam was her little boy and now he'd become like, kind of like a monster, you know. And the hominids, they watched as, you know, just a little bit of people were kind of torturing all the other people. And they said, you know, I don't really think we want anything to do with this. And then the humans went over to the hominids and they were like, maybe you can go build some pyramids too. They're like, we're not building any pyramids, bro. We got other things going on. The hominids knew, you know, there's something wrong with the humans. We got to get out of here. And so the hominids all got together and one day they said goodbye forever. And they walked out into the forest and they were playing hide and go seek. To this very day, the hominids are still out in the forest playing hide and seek. They don't want us to find them. They're hiding, you know, because they know that humans are kind of bad news, you know. But if you go out into the forest, you can probably find a hominid. They're out there. They don't want to be found, but you can go. Well, there's lots of people out in the world going around trying to find the hominids. And the humans, you know, they lived very unhappily ever after. This is not a happy story for the humans, but you know, it's a true story. This is what really happened. You know, people don't understand, but that's the way it is. And you think, well, did the humans really liquidate themselves? Well, they didn't yet. They did, you know, support, you know, the divine right of kings to rule forever, which was a mistake. And if you look out into the future, it looks like, you know, pretty soon the humans might be liquidating themselves. And this was all in the pamphlet they got from the aliens. So it's kind of a sad story, but that's the end of the story. And, you know, now we know where all the Bigfoots went and why we don't see them very much. It's because they're not very happy with us because we're kind of a disappointment from their perspective. But anyway, that's it for this week's show. I'll see you next time. You're all my best friends. Bye.